So let's talk about how you can gym cell at home because maybe for whatever reason, right? Maybe you don't want to go to the gym because it's inconvenient or for financial reasons or for whatever reason, you don't want to go to the gym. This is going to be the best way that you can build your physique at home. So before we start, right, I'm just going to make two quick assumptions. The first assumption is that you don't want to become like a home gym cell and spend like $2,000 to $3,000 for a 7 foot Olympic barbell and a full power rack with 400 or 500 pounds of Olympic weight plates and another fucking cable machine, adjustable bench, and preacher bench all at home, right? I'm gonna assume that you're not trying to build out this entire fucking home gym in your home, right? If you're trying to train at home and watching this video. And I'm also gonna assume that you don't care too much about getting super huge legs. Right? I'm gonna show you how to train legs with minimal equipment, but I'm just gonna assume that you don't care about like maximizing your leg growth and getting super big legs because if you're trying to get aesthetic, right, and actually have appeal in your physique, then legs really do not matter that much because, well, firstly, there's the whole sexual dimorphism thing, right? Men naturally have more muscle mass and more mass in our upper bodies. So by focusing on our upper bodies, we're more congruent with our dimorphism, and that's better for aesthetics. And also, getting huge legs doesn't make you look that aesthetic, and it will just age you more and compromise your longevity because the more total muscle mass that you carry on your body, the more that's going to stress your body and cause you to age faster, right? That's why people say that going to the gym can really age you. And yeah, just having a bunch of 20 extra pounds of muscle on your legs is just unnecessary aging that doesn't even make you look better. So yeah, I'm going to assume you don't care about building some super crazy home gym with like Olympic weight plates and you don't care about getting super huge legs. Based on those two things, then that's actually pretty easy for us to work with in terms of gym selling at home. So let's first go over the priority muscle groups. I know this is pretty water at this point, but that's going to be upper chest, shoulders, lats, neck, abs, biceps, forearms. And again, legs really do not matter that much at all for aesthetics. And as for the equipment, since we're not going to be getting a full Olympic size barbell and the full power rack with 400 pounds of weight plates, I'm going to keep it super simple, right? Ideally, you want to have a pull-up bar, right? This can be a mounted pull-up bar on your door, a freestanding one, whatever it is, as long as it can sustain your body weight and some like 50, 60 kilos of added weight onto your body weight. And it's not going to destroy your door frame or tear it apart or just cause any damage. Whatever thing you can do pull-ups off of, just get one of these. And then ideally, you want to have at least 50 to 60 kilos of weights, right? This can come in just a standard weight set where you have a standard bar, and ideally it might even come with dumbbell handles, which will be really useful as well as we go through some of the exercises. And you might think that 50 to 60 kilos of weight plates, that's going to be too little and you're not going to be able to do anything with it, which I'm going to show you how to. You can basically train your entire upper body really effectively with only 50 to 60 kilos, even if you're really strong at bench pressing or rows or whatever it is, right? 50 to 60 kilos, you can actually train every single upper body muscle group very effectively. For legs, that's when it starts to get a bit more complicated. But if you can do even more weight, like 80, 100 kilos, then by all means, go ahead. But the minimum requirement is 50 to 60 kilos is what I recommend. And if you really cannot get weights, like a weight set with standard bar and plates, then you can also consider getting resistance bands. So you can get a set of resistance bands. This style is a more heavy duty style, whereas if you have those tube handle styles, those are more easy to break. But just get a set of resistance bands that can go from light to heavy. And I'll be honest, right? Resistance bands, training with resistance bands, it works for some exercises like band lateral raises, band tricep pushdowns. Those work really well. But for many other exercises, it's just kind of shit, right? If you do a resistance band biceps curl, then sure, it feels good at first, but quickly it basically becomes really hard towards the top, right? So just imagine you're here doing a resistance band biceps curl. At the bottom, it's going to be pretty light at the bottom, but once you get to the top, once you're about to finish a curl, it becomes extremely heavy because of the nature of resistance bands getting heavier at the top. And that's why when you do resistance bands, a lot of times you just end up being able to only do half reps, and it's just not as good, right? So get actual weights if you can. You can still have some bands for certain exercises, but ideally you want to have the weights. But yeah, these are the equipment that you should have. And yeah, now I'm going to show you how to train basically all of the upper body muscle groups and also the lower body muscle groups really effectively with only these pieces of equipment. So yeah, let's get started. First thing is for your chest, right? Upper chest in particular, you are going to be doing some kind of weighted push-up, especially if you only have 50 to 60 kilos of weights. You're not going to be able to do any kind of bench pressing or incline pressing with that kind of weight. So if you have weights, then that's ideal. So you can just load it up onto a backpack and do weighted push-ups, right? 60 kilos on a bench press is literally nothing. That's like a warm-up weight. But if you do 60 kilos on a weighted push-up, especially with your feet elevated, and ideally you want to do some kind of deficit push-up so you can get 2 textbooks or just 2 thick yoga blocks, books, whatever it is, and put it underneath your hand so that when you're at the bottom, you can get a deeper range of motion. Because when you're doing a feet elevated push-up, then naturally you want to keep your body straight at the bottom. And if you don't have your hands elevated, that's really going to cut your range of motion short. So do a feet elevated deficit weighted push-up, and 60 kilos on a weighted push-up is actually quite substantial, right? That's actually pretty heavy. And even if you're bench pressing like 100 plus kilos for reps, I think 60 kilos on a feet elevated deficit weighted push-up is still going to be really challenging for you. And it's also quite stable, right? It's a pretty stable exercise. The only problem is that you have to brace a bit with your body and keep your body straight. But other than that, it is actually a really effective exercise for your upper chest and for your chest in general. Now, if you only have the resistance bands, which again, I highly recommend you get some actual weights. You can just put it in a backpack and do weighted push-ups. But if you only have resistance bands, then you can just loop it around the back of your body like this. So yeah, just follow this picture, loop the resistance bands around the back of your body, and you can do weighted push-ups like this. The problem is, right, I've done this myself for a while when I trained at home for like certain periods of time. The problem with this is, again, the problem with resistance bands is that they get really heavy at the top. So when you do resistance band push-ups, at the bottom, it's going to feel really light because there's not much band tension. And then once you get to the top of the push-up, that's when the resistance bands start giving you a lot more tension and becomes really heavy. So it basically becomes heavier near lockout and really light near at the bottom, which is kind of the opposite of what you want for chest, because at the bottom, that's where the chest works more, and at the top, that's where the triceps works more. So just be aware that if you are going to be doing resistance band weighted push-ups, you're still getting a decent workout, but it's really going to turn into more of a tricep exercise because of the fact that it gets the hardest during the lockout portion. But yeah, that's the first exercise. You're not going to be able to bench press, so just do weighted push-ups. As for shoulders, specifically the side delts, that is a lot easier. You can just do lateral raises, right? If you have, or upright rows, which 50 to 60 kilos on lateral raises and upright rows, you're going to be able to work with that, basically forever. You're not going to be able to lateral raise 60 kilos anytime soon. And you can also do it with resistance bands. And this is an exercise that actually works pretty decent with resistance bands. Just tie the band to like a bedpost or a couch, whatever it is, or just step on it. And then you can do lateral raises one arm at a time. And it is a very effective exercise. In fact, band lateral raises is probably better than dumbbell lateral raises. So yeah, those are the side delt options. If you want to do a shoulder press, then again, 50 kilos, 60 kilos on a shoulder press, standing barbell press, that might get a bit light pretty quickly. So you might want to consider doing behind the neck presses, right? Behind the neck press is actually going to train the side delts very, very effectively. Like I showed in other videos of how any kind of shoulder press where you're in the frontal or scapular plane is going to train the side delts really effectively. And yeah, behind the neck press, it's completely in the frontal plane. And the good thing about it is that it uses less weight than a front overhead press. So let's say in a seated barbell press from the front, you can do 60 kilos for like 6 to 8 reps. If you're doing a behind the neck press, you might only end up being able to do 40 to 45 kilos for 6 to 8 reps because it's just an exercise where you use less weight. Second good thing is that behind the neck press, you can do it standing and it's not going to be too big of an issue in terms of stability, because when you're doing a standing overhead press from the front, which I'm assuming you don't have an adjustable bench as well, you just have these pieces of equipment. When you're doing a standing overhead press from the front, you kind of have to press the weight like around your head in an arc like that. So because of that, there's more of a stability issue because you're pressing around your head and you need to stabilize more. Whereas in the behind the neck press, the weight comes straight down, right, to your center of mass. So when you actually do the behind the neck press, you'll find that stability is not really an issue and you can just do it standing up or seated without back support and it's not really a big deal. So yeah, for shoulders, pretty easy, just any kind of lateral raise, upright row. And if you want to do a press, you can work with the behind the neck press. Now for the back, lats specifically, since we have the pull-up bar and the weights, right? Because if you're doing rows with 50 to 60 kilos, again, that's literally nothing. We're using a lot of weighted calisthenics here. So just put the weights in the backpack and then you can just do pull-ups on the pull-up bar, right? 50 to 60 kilos on a weighted pull-up, especially if you do wide grip and do more reps, that is going to last you quite a while. In fact, many people might not even get there after many, many years of training. So you can just do that and that'll train your back extremely effectively. As for neck, since you have the weight plates, you can just do your basic neck curls and neck extensions, also side neck exercises. You can also do isometric neck exercises, which I do quite often because it's just really convenient. And ideally, if you have a neck harness, then you can just put on the neck harness and do neck extensions that way. You can also do neck curls on the neck harness, but I find that neck extension works really well on the neck harness, whereas neck curls might be a bit uncomfortable depending on what harness you have. So yeah, that's another really easy one, takes very little weight. And yeah, for arms, that's pretty simple, right? Biceps, you just do basic barbell curls, 50 to 60 kilos is plenty. For forearms, you can do wrist curls and reverse curls. For wrist curls, you can do it like this, where you have your wrist support off a bench. But if you are going to do a wrist curl off a bench, I recommend doing it with only a dumbbell so that you can spot your wrist with the other hand, right? Because if the weight gets too heavy and then it tears your wrist off, you can't really spot yourself. Whereas if you're doing it one arm at a time with a dumbbell, it's a bit safer. Or you can just do it standing, right? You can do standing behind the back wrist curls. It's really not that complicated. Just do any exercise where you curl your wrist with a weight, and you can do reverse curls for the brachioradialis. And if you want to be super optimal about the brachioradialis, you can do banded reverse curl with the band so that it's hardest at the top where the brachioradialis has the best leverage. So those are the main muscles, right, that are important for aesthetics, right? Upper chest, shoulders, lats, neck, abs, biceps, forearms. I'm also going to go over some of the less important muscles just to show you how to train them. So for your upper back and rear delts, you're going to be doing some kind of row. But if you only have 50 to 60 kilos in this example, then that's really not going to be enough, right? If you're doing 60 kilo rows, that's like nothing. So you are going to have to do some kind of one arm variation for your row if you're using the weights, right? So that's why I said at the start, if you are going to get a weight set of at least 50 to 60 kilos, ideally you want to get the ones that come with the dumbbell handles so that you can load as much weight as you can fit onto the dumbbell handles, and that'll make it a lot easier for one arm exercises like one arm rows or one arm overhead presses. You can also do bands, rows with bands, yeah, with one arm at a time if you don't have free weights. But again, if you have a pull-up bar and free weights, I highly recommend doing pull-ups and rows with those instead of doing rows with resistance bands, because again, the problem with resistance bands is that it just gets really hard at the end range of motion, so you're going to end up just doing a bunch of half reps. So resistance bands is like just not that good for many exercises. So yeah, for your back, upper back, just if you have a barbell, only have a barbell, then you can try doing something called the Meadows row, where you put an end of the barbell into a corner like a landmine and do one arm rows that way. You can also just try doing one arm bent over barbell rows by grabbing the middle of the barbell, although sometimes it might be a bit off balance. And if you have a dumbbell handle, that's ideal because you can just load as much weight as you can onto a singular dumbbell and do one arm dumbbell rows that way, either bent over or just holding onto something. And yeah, you can use it pretty versatile for both lats and upper back. Obviously for lats, keep your elbows tucked in, and for upper back, keep your elbows more flared out. And yeah, I should have put this earlier, but for abs, it's pretty simple. Just do weighted sit-ups. You can put your feet under a couch or under a bed. And when you're doing weighted sit-ups, hold the weight behind your head, right? Don't hold the weight in front of you because that's just going to make it super easy. But if you hold the weight behind your head, that's actually going to make it super challenging. Obviously, in the gym, you can do this with a decline. That's what I recommend. But doing it flat is still a decent alternative. And you can load the weight up onto a dumbbell handle so it's easier to grab, or even a barbell, and do it that way too. So those are the main upper body exercises. And also, last one, tricep. Just do a barbell skull crusher, dumbbell skull crusher, or a tricep banded press down, which the tricep banded press down and the banded lateral raise are probably the two main band exercises I would prefer over free weight exercises in this example. So yeah, those are just all of the upper body exercises. If you have limited equipment, literally costs like less than $150 for a pull-up bar, the weight set, and maybe some resistance bands as well if you want to use it. And yeah, you can use it and just train your whole upper body extremely effectively, and you won't have to go to the gym. Now let's talk a bit about the lower body and how to train your lower body really effectively with only 50 to 60 kilos, right? What about legs? And real quick, if you're interested in building your physique without aging yourself, you can go check out the BP Fitness System, where I talk about natural gym selling, building physique without aging yourself, primal diet, science-based lifting, and all of that stuff. Link in the description, and you can go check it out. So for legs, there are two isolation exercises you can do for your quads and your hamstrings respectively that are basically body weight exercises that don't take a lot of weight. Excuse me. So the Nordic curl is it's basically a hamstring curl, but with your body weight. And you can kind of see how it works, where you lower yourself down and then you can curl yourself back up using only your hamstrings. The problem is with the Nordic curl is that it is just extremely challenging, right? If you're just starting out, you can put your feet under your bed and try and do this. Chances are you're only going to be able to do negative reps and slow negative reps, and you're not going to be able to do full reps. So if you did get the pull-up bar and the resistance band, like I suggested earlier, you can actually just set up a pull-up bar right on your doorway. I don't know what it looks like, a pull-up bar like this, and then you can set up a resistance band so that you're holding the resistance band and do band assisted Nordic curls. So it kind of makes it easier. And yeah, it actually fits the resistance profile quite well, because on a Nordic curl, it's hardest at the bottom, and that's also the bands give you the most tension. And at the top, when it's easiest, that's also when the band gives you the least amount of tension. So it actually fits the resistance profile really well, and you can just use that as an alternative for hamstring curls. Similar thing with sissy squats, right? These are basically the hamstring curl and leg extensions from calisthenics. You can just basically see how it works, right? You can hold on to something and do sissy squats like that, and it functions the same way as a leg extension, because in a leg extension, right, you have a fixed hip, which just like in a sissy squat, you have a fixed hip too, so you can still train the rectus femoris. So these are the isolations. And in terms of the compound exercises, right, the alternatives for the squats and deadlift, the main ones I would recommend, since we only have 50 to 60 kilos, is the Bulgarian split squat and the stiff leg good morning. Because obviously with only 50 to 60 kilos, we're not going to be able to squat, front squat, Romanian deadlift, stiff leg deadlift. We're not going to be able to do any of those effectively since we just don't have enough weight. So with the Bulgarian split squat, 60 kilos might still be a bit light. But if you don't really care about your legs that much, you can just use 60 kilos to maintain your legs with Bulgarian split squats. And stiff leg good mornings is actually a pretty good choice for training your hamstrings and a bit of glutes if you have really limited equipment, because it's basically like a stiff leg deadlift, but you have the bar on your back in a high bar position like you would in a good morning. And it's actually pretty good if you have limited weight, right? If you're doing 60 kilos on a stiff leg good morning for, let's say, higher reps, like 12 reps, then that's actually pretty decent. Whereas on a stiff leg deadlift, you might have to use 350 pounds to get the same effect-ish. So yeah, that's a recommendation I would give if you want to do stiff leg deadlifts and you don't have enough weight. Just put the bar on your back and you can do the same stiff leg deadlift motion, but just turn it into a stiff leg good morning, and that's still going to be really good for your glutes, hamstrings, and adductors. And lastly, an honorable mention I would recommend as a squat alternative, if let's say the Bulgarian split squat is too light and you only have 60 kilos, that's going to be the feet elevated Zercher grip barbell pistol squat. So I know it sounds like a mouthful, but just think of a feet elevated pistol squat like this, because the main issue with the pistol squat is that it's the mobility demands, right? You need to have really good mobility to do the pistol squat. And the pistol squat is basically a squat, but with one leg. So that means any weight that you hold is going to be doubled. So by standing on a box or standing on a bench or just standing on anything, you can see how it reduces the stability demands for the pistol squat. And as for how you're going to hold the weight, you can hold the weight in a Zercher grip, because it's just going to be more comfortable and easier for your balance. Since on a pistol squat, if you're holding the weight behind your back, you might fall backwards and that might take really good mobility. Whereas if you just hold the weight in front of you, it's going to be a lot easier to do pistol squats that way. So by doing the feet elevated Zercher grip barbell pistol squats, you can turn that 60 kilos, right, of standard weights into 120 kilos when it comes to the squat, which again, it's not that much, but if you're doing higher reps, then it's still kind of workable. And yeah, you can just kind of double the weight for squats. So let's say you only have 80 kilos, right? Squatting 80 kilos is literally nothing. Now with the feet elevated Zercher grip barbell pistol squats, now that becomes 160 kilos when it comes to the squat, which if you're doing 160 kilo squats for 10 reps, that is still pretty substantial. So that's just the best way to train squats with limited weight and limited equipment if you want to do that. So yeah, that's what I would recommend for training legs and gym selling at home. And I'll see you in the next video.